Let's be very clear from the start. What we're about to go through is not a theory. It isn't speculation. We are analyzing declassified government documents that prove, in black and white, that the United States military once turned the very atmosphere into a weapon. This is the documented history of the climatological battlefield. And this single question, asked by a U.S. military official back in 1972, really cuts right to the cold, calculated heart of it all. It speaks to a secret war, one fought not with explosives, but with engineered storm clouds, a war where the prize was controlling the rain itself. So how on earth was this even possible? To really get it, we have to look at the science. We need to understand the technology that allowed military planners to see a monsoon not as a force of nature, but as a tactical weapon waiting to be aimed. For years, this stuff was just whispers. Rumors in the scientific community, murmurs in the halls of Congress, all of it easily dismissed. But what was once just speculation is now documented fact, laid bare in the government's own files. The rumors, as it turns out, were all true. The core technology is something called cloud seeding, and the process is, well, almost deceptively simple. An aircraft flies into a cloud and disperses these tiny particles, things like silver iodide. These particles act like seeds, giving the water vapor something to condense around, which then falls as rain. You're basically giving Mother Nature a push, telling a cloud when and where to rain. And this science wasn't just sitting in a lab. Oh no, it was put into practice. So let's open the declassified file on the most infamous weather warfare program in American history, the top-secret Operation Popeye. Now you can see from the timeline, this was not some brief, half-baked experiment. It was a systematic evolution. It starts with small CIA tests in '63, it moves to a dedicated test phase by '66, and then, by 1967, it becomes a full-blown, sustained military operation that ran for 5 straight years. You know, secrets this big rarely stay buried forever. Thanks to leaks from investigative journalists and the explosive release of the Pentagon Papers, Congress was eventually forced to look into it. And the result was this, a classified hearing in 1974, where Pentagon officials finally had to testify, under oath, about the secret program they'd been running. And the program's purpose was brutally tactical. The goal was to literally weaponize the monsoon season, to turn the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the main supply line for North Vietnamese forces, into an impassable sea of mud for as long as possible. Just to give you a sense of the scale here, between 1967 and 1972, a single unit, the 54th Weather Reconnaissance Squadron, flew 2,602 of these cloud seeding missions. Their motto, reportedly, was "Make mud, not war." And across those thousands of flights, they deployed this many units, 47,409 cartridges filled with silver and lead iodide, all fired into the clouds over Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. This was a massive, sustained effort to engineer the climate for a military advantage. And while all this was happening in the skies over Southeast Asia, the official story back home was that it was a fantasy. Secretary of Defense Melvin Laird went before Congress and flatly denied that any such program even existed. But the paper trail, the documents, they told a very different story. But here's the thing, Operation Popeye wasn't just some isolated rogue tactic. No, it was actually part of a much bigger and, frankly, more chilling strategic doctrine. This idea of viewing the entire global climate as a new domain of conflict, a new battlefield. Take a look at this quote. It's from a declassified CIA study from 1974. It shows that the agency was already thinking about how natural climate shifts, never mind man-made ones, could trigger the collapse of entire nations. Suddenly, the atmosphere itself had become an intelligence problem. And they had case studies. For instance, the agency analyzed the massive failure of the Soviet wheat crop in 1972. They looked at how a period of bad weather could shake a rival superpower to its core. They were building models to figure out a nation's breaking point when put under climactic stress. This kind of strategic thinking went far beyond just making it rain. Military planners began to explore how to control the very medium of modern warfare and global communication, the upper atmosphere. Look at the title on this declassified research paper, Communications Dominance via Ionospheric Modification. The goal was crystal clear. Control the ionosphere, that layer of the atmosphere that reflects radio waves,
and you could boost your own communications while completely blinding your enemy. And the methods they proposed were incredibly sophisticated. We're talking about injecting chemical vapors to create artificial clouds way up in the atmosphere, or using massive ground-based antennas to literally heat and bend sections of the ionosphere, turning them into artificial mirrors for radio signals, or just disrupting them completely. And you have to remember, this wasn't happening in a vacuum. Declassified intelligence assessments noted that the Soviet Union was deep into the same kind of research, often at a level described as considerably greater than what was happening in the West. It was a hidden arms race for control of near space. But research this radical couldn't stay in the shadows forever. And when these programs finally came to light, the international backlash would end up changing the literal laws of war. The direct fallout from the world learning about Operation Popeye was a global outcry. This pressure led the United Nations to pass something called the Environmental Modification Convention, or EMONOD, in 1977. It's a treaty that explicitly bans large-scale weather warfare. But here's the big question. After all that, did it even work? Well, the official answer is complicated. It's buried in conflicting reports. At the time, Pentagon scientists were convinced it was a success, but a later, more sober report to Congress concluded that its effectiveness was basically unproven, that there was no hard data to show it had a major impact on the war. The technology, however, didn't just disappear. Stripped of its military purpose, cloud seeding is now used by dozens of countries for peaceful reasons. Everything from trying to increase rainfall in places like the UAE to making sure the skies were clear over Beijing for the 2008 Olympics. The weapon, it seems, has been domesticated. So this declassified history isn't just some dusty relic from the Cold War. It's a crucial data point. Because as nations today are openly exploring far more advanced forms of geoengineering, these old documents serve as a stark reminder that the ambition to control our environment is nothing new. And it forces us to ask a deeply unsettling question. We've now seen what the atmospheric battlefield of the past looks like. What does the battlefield of tomorrow look like?